This is Test Case Scenario with me, your host, Jason Baum. This podcast is the definitive hub for knowledge and stories in the software testing and development communities. If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button and let's dive straight into the episode. Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Test Case Scenario. I am your host, Jason Baum, and with me as always, our co-host, partner in crime, good friend, and colleague, Marcus Merrell. Marcus, thanks for joining again.
Thank you. You're actually my boss, so.
Yeah, I forced him. It is, I make him do this. Make him talk to me. I'm lonely unless he shows up. And then it's just me talking to myself or like one of the things back here. And he's in the same location today.
This is like 4 episodes in a row.
I know. We're going to do this in the airport purposely. I think I already made that joke. Oh no, we're going to have to edit that joke out. Darn.
Well, I was in London 2 weeks ago, New York last week, New York next week. So you're just getting me on days where I happen to be at home in between.
Yeah, we're actually going to be together next week. So we're going to have to record an episode.
You should do that.
Yes, we should. All right. And today we are very lucky to be joined by Jenna Charlton. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on Test Case Scenario.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And Jenna, would you mind giving us like a quick introduction of yourself and then we'll get into the topic?
Yeah. So I'm Jenna Charlton. I've been in the QA testing world for around 15 years. It's what I've decided it's at because I've lost track. I have, worked my way up from being like a junior all the way through test lead, spent some time as the director of product for a testing tool. And I just, left a position where I was a developer advocate for a testing tool. And now I am working on grad school and looking for a job.
I know that we have run in the same circles. I've definitely seen you, in several places, but this is our first time meeting. So it's very nice to meet you. And have you met Marcus before?
So we figured out we haven't. I think we just gone in the same circle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
So
I've certainly heard your name a bunch.
It was bound to happen, right? Like the gravitational pull of whatever is, I don't know. I'm not that creative at the moment. So awesome. Well, I'm really glad that you're here. And, we wanted to talk about the job market. It's something we've been meaning to talk about. Marcus and I talk about what's been happening in QA quite a bit and layoffs and especially over the past couple of years. It's a tech thing. It's a industry. It's just an economy thing, but then especially feels pretty rough right now with QAs, especially more on the manual side. Some of that I think, and we've kind of, this is now me editing, but I think that some of that is shift left and there's many other reasons, but we wanted to explore today the topic of shaping the future of QA and strategic insights for leadership in a shifting job market.
I have a hypothesis that I want to run by our academically inclined researcher guest. Jason, I don't know if you want to do any more setup, but I want to test this hypothesis and see.
Let's do it. I love when Marcus goes rogue. This is like,
it's not that rogue. It's something
Okay.
I think I've said on this podcast before, but I don't know that Jenna has heard it. So I have 2 theories one theory on the cause and one theory on how it's actually happening right now, which is that there's a bunch of layoffs in QA as far as I know, a lot of jobs being lost. I've been asked to cite my sources and I'm like, Google is my source. Just, there's a lot out there. Also, my LinkedIn is full of, friends who are looking for work. So my hypothesis for the reason for it is that, of course, testing has been kind of beleaguered for a while. It's been underappreciated. And I think that part of that is a little bit on the blame of those of us in testing who have not taken a risk-first strategic approach to talking about testing and celebrating our successes and demonstrating our value at the highest levels of a company's, executive core. We have concerned ourselves, and I am just as guilty of this as anyone else, We've concerned ourselves with, hey, look at how much code coverage I gave you. Look at this trophy on the wall back here that is, showing that I achieved some number, or I set some number of test cases, or look at this really cool thing I automated, as opposed to, I helped your business save millions by not shipping a horrific defect, which we did all the time, and we kind of kept it to ourselves. So we didn't take our seat at the table. And now what I'm seeing is the second part is the executive core now has permission to get rid of QA people because of AI. AI's automated all that. It's like, no, it hasn't. It hasn't done any of that. That's just your horrible excuse for doing something you've been wanting to do for a long time. And that is cut jobs, even though AI has a much better chance of cutting developer jobs than QA jobs in reality. So anyway, all of that right at your feet. And I want to hear, what do you think and what are your theories?
I agree. And I have some ways to break it down and some, what I think are unique insights into this specific thing. So one, we know that QA jobs are being lost. There is no way to argue that. People could say, dude, cite your sources. My sources are the number of tech jobs that have been lost. And if you go look at the job titles, it is testers, it's SDETs, it's automated QAs. It is everyone engaged in testing. If you think just because you're an SDET, you are immune, you are not. Everybody's losing their job right now. So I think that's one thing. Like, the proof is there that the jobs are being lost. I think two, absolutely, companies have gotten away with taking quality for granted. And they have created an illusion that the frameworks that exist already are enough and that code coverage is enough. And it is partly our fault for not screaming our successes loud enough and for not demanding the space that we deserve. Developers definitely demand space for the work that they do. But because testers, by personality trait, and Isabel Evans is a better one to talk about this, but one of our traits is that we are communicators and we're collaborators. It's kind of innate to the personality that tends to be good at testing. Collaborators and communicators aren't the ones who say, hey, look at me, I did this great thing, check it out. Like, we don't do that. We don't throw ourselves a party. It's not in our nature. So we do have to get better about that. And I think that while there's a million things that cause this defect, I think Crowstrike is a fantastic example of taking quality for granted. Yes, it was something that probably could be considered relatively low risk if you look at their risk assessment. However, it wasn't. It was massive. And they pretty much admitted in all of the post-mortem that, hey, it was this one system and we really didn't have enough, different use cases in there. We didn't think enough through the positive and negative cases, and it came back to bite us. And guess who's hiring? The job losses are there. We are not loud enough. AI is definitely a part of this. So I really put a lot of the, replace testers with AI at the feet of the analyst firms. I think that they have a lot of ownership here. I think that the golf course sales cycle has a huge piece of this. They tell companies they're going to save money by going AI and replacing their testers with it. I think that in the end, this is really going to hurt quality overall. I think that commercially available software is going to suffer. I also believe that if this narrative doesn't change, that we're going to see development jobs be treated the same way. And we're going to see a big loss there as well. What really matters, though, is that it isn't just about what analysts are telling the organizations that are buying these tools and investing in AI as a replacement. It's also about the marketing. And the marketing is saying it as well. So we're seeing this cycle of what is still not fully proven and not really successful being sold out to the market, telling a story that really isn't going to wind up being truthful in the end. And it's going to hurt everyone. And I think the biggest thing that we need to think about is that the economics at play. When we think about software built in the US, it's more expensive to build software here. I acknowledge that. US tech employees are the highest paid in the world. So I understand them wanting to replace tech employees with, other options. However, we stop being the solutions of choice if the quality goes down, which then economically, as a country in the global markets, we start to lose. So there's this huge, I don't even know how to put it, but there's this vast amount of stuff, space, things that all of this touches. The job losses, AI, all of it winds up being in this huge vacuum that will hurt us in a multitude of ways. I could keep going on this, but I'm not going to because it gets real depressing and really complicated. And there's no reason for that. But
well, I think to understand where we are, we have to go to how did we get to here, right? The evolution a little bit. And QA is one of those areas that has evolved, despite, I think, some saying we haven't, like the industry hasn't evolved. I would be curious to ask you both, over the last decade or so, as automation has become more of a rule rather than a suggestion, and AI and all that. What has changed specifically in QA, and what are the new expertise that QA leaders need today that weren't as crucial in the past? Jenna, you want to go first, and then Marcus?
I have two things here. One is for testers themselves, especially if you are not an automated tester. The days of, I just have expertise in testing are over. I think it's really critical that you find something that you are really good at that isn't just testing, that can be almost like an expertise and a specialization. We've talked for years about the T-shaped tester. And for some people, that's going to be the right choice. For me, it wasn't. I'm a unicorn. My expertise isn't automation. It's test strategy. It's exploratory testing. It's risk-based testing. It's experience. It's the user experience, and specifically looking at workflows and accessibility and how software impacts people. And it's things like product, where I have, some knowledge and have spent some time. Not everybody's going to shape their career that way. Some people might shape their career towards performance, or may shape their career towards security. Whatever it is, find something that gives you a specialization and a unique skill set that will give you opportunities that you wouldn't see otherwise. The other side of this is leaders. And we really have to start thinking about, it's no longer just, I have a team of testers and this like lone estet who builds a framework that we sort of support, but never really fully utilize. Or I have just a team of estets and no manual testers. You've really got to start thinking about strategy from a holistic way. And I think there are folks who are really good at doing that. And I think there's a lot of organizations who haven't gotten there yet. So I think that's really the next phase is truly being holistic about how we test, and strategy that uses the best of what a computer can give us and the best of what a human can give us.
Yeah. Marcus, what do you think?
I'm on the Selenium project, so I tend to look at a lot of things through a Selenium lens. So I apologize for that bias, but I also think that there's a lot there because hundreds of millions of people use Selenium. Sorry, there are hundreds of millions of downloads per month, which may not translate to hundreds of millions of users. A lot of users. I think that we in the project maybe didn't set ourselves or the industry up for success by giving people a tool which was part of the free and open web and gave them power like they had never had before, but required a certain amount of engineering acumen in order to be able to do it well without building out the ergonomics and the bells and whistles that make it easy. And as a result, you have a whole bunch of products out there which are either free and open source and either spottily maintained or maintained by a very few number of people that are actually pretty good and doing good in the world. Or you have a bunch of people who have monetized Selenium to make it easy And these products tend not to be all that good. I'm talking about things that generate test cases, not necessarily, the execution, because that's all on the user code. So what I'm getting at here is a long way of getting at is, as you mentioned, the SDET sitting off in the corner building a framework for 2 months while everyone else goes off and does their work. That was me. 4 different jobs I had where I did that exact thing. And what was I not doing during that period? I was not focusing on my business, my customers, my users. I wasn't focusing on our company's revenue and how to protect risk. I was in a lab wearing a white lab coat, not interacting with anyone and not doing anything above the line for my business, and eroding the trust, by and large, of all the executives who funded that kind of work. Now, in the end, it worked out well. But that's not the part they remember, because once again, we don't really revel in our success and we don't trumpet our wins. So what they remember is this guy sitting off in the corner doing this thing. And so what I'm saying is, over the past 10 years, leadership had like 2010 and beyond until 2022-ish. We need testing, so let's just hire some people and let them figure it out. And then at some point in the last 10 years, they go, we're not getting a whole lot of value out of this. And since we didn't do much to promote that value, we're now vulnerable. And what's interesting is that Jason has said on this podcast and in the article that shift left hasn't really happened. It's not actually real for the most part. It should be, but it's not. And what I've said is that AI doesn't really help with testing yet. Not really. So why are all these jobs being lost by 2 pieces of fiction? Because it's not real. Because fundamentally we didn't prove our value. And sort of going back to that original point. So to me, that's how this evolved to be what it is right now.
Yeah, and to argue against myself, as I think Titus Fortner has now taught me to do better than anybody. I think shift left has happened for some really mature organizations, and it's much harder to do in others. And I think time has sort of proven that. But as we start talking about DevOps, so we are in an agile and DevOps driven world now. So how should the relationship between QA and development teams be structured, for maximum efficiency?
I don't think there's a should, because it's going to look different in every organization, especially depending on industry and whether there's regulating bodies and whether there's oversight boards and things like that. It would be impossible to say that a company that does like pharmaceuticals, because you see a lot of QA jobs in the pharmaceutical space, it would be impossible to say that a company like that should follow the same processes as sauce labs. It's just fundamentally different. Even the way they approach agile is different. What I think that organizations need to start doing is trusting their agile coaches and saying, instead of going all in on Scrum or all in on Safe or all in on XP, we are going to take what's effective and works for us, and we're going to make that our process. And we're going to do that across the engineering organization. So it's going to look different everywhere, but it's also going to look the same in that everybody should be doing the little a agile and the little a practices versus the big A agile and the big P practices. If that makes any sense.
That does make sense. Yeah. What do you think, Marcus?
Yeah, I think it's all about context. Absolutely. We have one large banking institution that's a customer of ours who their main metric that they look at is continuous improvement, not any particular target or number, but it's the fact that some set of numbers that we target to grow around success criteria, lowering failure rates, clean builds, that kind of thing. What they want is to continuously be able to increase the confidence they have that when they ship software, nothing's going to go wrong. And I think that to me, if you want to give one universal goal to a team, that's probably about the only one I can imagine giving. Otherwise, it is going to depend on your context.
What strategies should QA leaders adopt, maybe to make sure their teams are more agile and adaptable as things are changing? And DevOps is like just one of many changes. What are some strategies that the team leaders could take to make sure that QA remains relevant and is part of the rest of the team?
So I'm old school. And I'm old school and part of the new school, which is the funny thing. I think that the two most important things for an entire engineering org are traceability and full engineering being all in on requirements, meaning that everybody who's going to have something to do with a requirement is part of review for it. Because quality starts from the first second that a user story is generated. And we all keep forgetting that that's where testing starts. And that's what automation and that's what AI can't do for you. And you're in an echo chamber when you're a product person or a business analyst writing that requirement or that user story on your own. You need the dissenting voices. And you even need what Rachel Kibler calls the designated dissenter, whose job it is that week to be the squeaky wheel. You say, well, what about this? Well, what about that? I'm going to challenge you on this thing. That's where quality starts, and we've forgotten that.
I think that we go after trophies. We go after these numbers. I've been told multiple times in my career that you need to give me a certain amount of coverage, or I need this many test cases per week. And what I would say about every time that's been asked of me is that if I had, ignored that and just as an example, if I had delivered 10 fast, well-engineered automated tests that would guarantee the flow of revenue continues functionally after we push the release button, and we had made sure that those 10 tests stay green every single time and deliver no false positives, no reason not to trust the scripts, that would have been a far better use of our time than the 4,000 tests we did develop that were, marginal quality, failed 20% of the time, that kind of thing.
Yeah, let's talk about the job market a little bit and the various dynamics there. So it's changing considerably. We already kind of mentioned that. There's another variable too. I don't know how much y'all would consider remote work and global collaboration, affecting some of these hiring practices in the QA industry. But how would you say QA leaders can kind of ensure their teams are continuously learning and adapting to stay competitive, picking up some of these traits that you just kind of mentioned? And also, do you think those other variables are playing here?
If I were advising a QA leader, I would start to say, you need to figure out how to fold in accessibility, security, and maybe performance and load testing into your current job with your current staff, and start to get signals earlier on in your life cycle that you can deliver. And I would particularly focus on accessibility now with the European Accessibility Act coming, but always security. Security is always a good thing. Both of those things are currently all the way to the right before release. Pull them into the left and incorporate them into your daily work. That would be like the strongest advice I could give a QA lead right now. I feel like I dove right in on that one, so I'd be curious.
Yeah. I also want to ask you why. Follow up is why.
Well, so security, do we need to say any more than Crowstrike? Just say, and Crowstrike wasn't even about vulnerabilities. It was about functional testing of a dependency of a dependency. So your software depends on Windows. You don't even know that Windows depends on Crowstrike. You can't be the cause and the origin of something like that. So security testing involves that kind of examining these dependencies of your dependencies as well as vulnerabilities. And if you can get that done before the software leaves the testing environment, you've saved your company millions of dollars over finding it at a pen test you only do every 6 months or something like that. So, you shall make yourself known to the highest executives in the company if you do that, and they will understand your value, in my opinion. EAA, if you can point to the avoidance of millions of dollars or euros worth of fines that would have been realized in June of 2025 after the regulation goes into effect, you start to count and tally up those numbers, I think you'll start to find some agency.
Yeah. When it comes to accessibility, it is easier, cheaper, and more effective to start with accessibility first. Inclusive design is where we start with that. And really, we should start calling it inclusive testing when we're looking at accessibility from day one in testing versus waiting for an audit or a specialist. No tester without the right training is going to be able to do all of the accessibility testing you need. However, any tester can do basic stuff. Any tester can do some keyboard only. Any tester can turn on a screen reader. Any tester can do some basic stuff with color contrast and things like that.
Studying image alt text.
Yeah, exactly. Like anybody can do that. You can train your testers to do that. I am 100% in agreement with everything you said. And I think the best backup for it is going back to research all the way from the 70s. I think it was IBM that researched the cost of quality, or we should really call it the cost of poor quality, where the cost to fix a defect is exponentially larger the further on in the development cycle you go. The more we can do early, the cheaper it is to deliver quality software. Companies love to know that they're saving money. We have to figure out how to make what has become commonplace. And what's commonplace is us delivering releasable software on a regular basis. We have to find a way to show them that there's actually dollars and cents value there. Every company I've gone to that had bad, releases on a regular basis, once things started to be consistent and stable every release, they forgot what a nightmare it was when they would release and spend 2 weeks fixing defects and be terrified to release again. Showing the dollars and cents is a way to remind them of that value. And that's a big thing that testing leaders, QA leaders need to get used to, is how to figure out that math and demonstrate that.
Quality doesn't cost, quality saves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Love
We're not a
that.
cost center.
Yes.
We've
not a
always been
cost center.
considered a cost center. And
Yes.
that's just absolutely wrong.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point.
Realized I used we because I identify as a tester. And this is something we were talking about before. And I was just thinking about this time early in my career. I'm curious if you have a similar experience, Jenna. I'm test architect. I've got 10 years of experience doing API and testing into 2012 when this conversation happened, more like 13 years. And I go in and I talk to the VP of engineering and I said, "Hey, I'm Marcus, I'm your tester." And he's like, "Well, from what I understand, you're way more than a tester." And I was like, why would I identify as more? I mean, that is fundamentally everything I do comes down to saving your ass when the risk, comes to town. I am a tester. I can do tricks, but I'm a tester. Do you have a similar kind of feeling about it, Jenna?
I do. It's really belittling for someone to say, "Oh, you're more than that." And we talked a little bit about the research that I'm doing in grad school.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah.
So I don't want to get too deep because we'd be here for a long time. But essentially, I'm researching the idea of professional identity formation in testers, and started that from the idea of a theoretical framework of symbolic interactionism that says that our identity is formed by our relationship with humans and non-human actors. So in this case, our profession. And the very first study I ran, I asked on the very last question, some people might remember filling out this survey, being a tester is part of what makes me me. So being a tester is a symbol of my identity. 75% of people responded at the highest yes, or, slightly under that yes on a Likert scale. Likert scale, for those who don't know, is like a sliding scale of don't agree at all to absolutely 100% agree. How can you say that I'm more than just a tester when my identity is tester? I can't be more than what I see myself as. And not only does it devalue what we do and all the value we bring, if you say, "Oh, just a tester," it also hurts on a fundamental level. It hurts because if you think about the other parts of your identity, like if, as a non-binary person, if somebody said to me, "Oh, well, you're just that. Like, you're just a they, them, but you look femme." Like that hurts me because it says I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who I believe I am. I shouldn't say think. It's not who I believe I am. It's not how I see myself. When you tell somebody that they're not who they believe they are, you've damaged them in a way that's sometimes impossible to fix in a personal relationship. If you say that to one of your employees, you should anticipate that person's engagement as an employee is going to start diminishing from that moment on, and their ability to trust you as a leader has started to diminish from that moment on. It can literally be the difference between this is a really successful, happy employee to this is somebody who might be going on a PIP in 6 months because they've become disengaged.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. And I cannot believe that someone said that you are more than a tester. I still don't understand what that means.
That is, it was such a natural thing for him to say.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of that at that. I've gotten a lot of that in my whole career. He would be bewildered to know that was my reaction. It's like, well, obviously you want to be more than a tester, right? I mean, it's perfectly clear.
Kind of emphasizes the unspoken sometimes, that is how we think of the importance of quality. When it's said we care about quality, what's really means is we really want to get this out. We want it to be really, really good. And gosh, we hope it works, but
your ass is on the line if it doesn't.
Yeah. that can't be the take. That cannot be the take anymore, especially when so much of this world is technical. Our entire lives are digital at this point. So it has to work, right? I guess the question is, as we're going towards the future, since I brought it there, what is the next trend that you see, and where do you see that role, the role of QA, evolving, say the next 5 years? I don't know if anybody has a crystal ball to see the next 10, but like over the next 5 years, what do you think is going to happen to the role? Or how about this? Create a perfect team that will last for 5 years. How about that? Does anything last for 5 years anymore?
I don't know.
I can tell you what I would like to see, what my perfect world for testers is. So I don't know if anybody's ever looked at Lisa Crispin and Jana Gregory's holistic testing. I would love to see that become more of a standard practice. And I would also really like to see organizations embracing the idea of multi-skill, multidiscipline testers, and really hiring for that. Doing things like tracking skill inventory so you understand what skills are on your team, and knowing what skills that you need to build into your team. Say there's no one on your team that does security. Hands up, who wants to learn this? I'll send you to a class. I'll send you to a conference. We'll pay for you to take a class. But also thinking about the things that are less tangible, like security performance. Those are exact sciences, so to speak. Not exact sciences, but we see them as very specific paths. What we also need to see as a path is the testers who are exceptional at seeing risk, the testers who are really, really skilled at understanding experience. And this means that we might see people who are role shifters. Maybe we see some UX people shifting into testing. Things like that, where we see these shadows and shifts. People job shadow, people shift around, people look around, where we start to make these teams that are holistic, not just in practice, but also in skills. And where we don't need to depend on external resources and outsourced work anymore, because we can do it ourselves and we do it really well. That's what I would love to see.
Yeah, it's really well said. Marcus, what do you think?
I mean, it's so difficult to say. I think that 5 years ago, I was being told by a lot of people that the testing profession was going to be gone in 5 years. And I mean, here we are. There are fewer, but I think that to an extent, they have already overcorrected, and maybe if they haven't yet, they will soon, and start to figure out that actually we like this. We need testers. What I'm afraid that the things that AI is good at, the new generation of LLMs like Claude and ChatGPT, the new ones, they're good enough at writing the automation code that I'm afraid a lot of junior positions are not going to make it, or won't be created in the first place, because senior people will have such a force multiplier in productivity from this stuff. Now, I still think that's a little bit fiction, but I think people are going to fire first and try to fill in the gaps later. What I'm afraid of is that there will be fewer testers, but for those testers, I think they'll be in a pretty good position, because they're going to be doing some really interesting stuff and a lot of very significant work. I think there will never be enough testers ever again. That's my current prediction.
I don't think we had enough to begin with.
Agreed. Although I do think that a lot of us wasted, and I'm guilty, wasted a lot of time in 2008 to 2013 when Selenium was brand new and we could do everything. We over-indexed on it. We over-adopted the tool in the wrong way. I'm ready to just declare that and apologize.
Do you want to say that I am always concerned about the loss of the junior?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Organizations, not just testing, not even just development, always want to hire 3 to 5 years experience minimum. Juniors bring really, really interesting things to organizations. They bring new perspectives. They ask questions that nobody's thought to ask in years because they don't know anything yet. Like I remember there was a company I worked for that I loved working for that said that when they do college hiring, the most important questions are, do I like this person? Can I work with this person? Do they know to put on pants? And like, that's what they hired their juniors for, because they said everything else we can teach. And every team had juniors on it. Didn't matter what they were working on. There were juniors there. And they always brought really interesting, important thoughts. And so I really hope that we don't see a huge loss of new people into the role because we need them for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that not just for QA, I think that the role of the junior, regardless of the profession, is unfortunately a dying breed that we cannot let go. I mean, how else did anybody get their starts, right? I mean, it was so important. We can all remember our first role, first big break, right? And I was going to say, regardless of where we are in the future in the next 5 years, the one thing that I hope that I hope doesn't go away, regardless of the position, what we call it, I hope quality is still just, honestly, is more important than it is today. I think we are seeing more and more instances like Crowstrike. Crowstrike isn't like a one-off, right? These things are going to happen. And inevitably, things are always going to happen. But let's get better at catching them. Let's get better at testing in production. Let's get better at catching them early and often. Let's get better at it in the process. Let's include the QAs in the strategic process. Gosh, crazy idea there that's actually what Shift Left was meant to do, was actually bring the tester into the conversation in the first place at a strategic level. But hey, let's actually align and let's get quality to be just as important. Maybe not just as important as speed. Speed's always going to win, but let's get it to be a much closer second than it is today.
You can have both. You just need to
have both.
Not waste time on dumb, hard to maintain tests and focus on the most important stuff. And you can do both.
That's right. Jenna, thank you so much for coming on. It was a really great conversation. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you, Marcus. And thank you so much to you, our listeners, for joining us and giving us the most important thing you can, your time. And we will see you again next week on another test case scenario. Have a good one, everyone. Thank you for joining us on Test Case Scenario. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'll make sure to respond to each and every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell to keep in touch. If you missed our last episode, it's popping up on your screen right now. Go, click it. Until next time on Test Case Scenario.